The gates opened at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning. 37 staff members moved through the mansion like a silent army. Flowers arrived in refrigerated trucks, white chrysanthemums, red peonies, golden orchids flown in from Thailand. 12 chefs took over the kitchen. A string quartet set up in the East Hall. A jazz band assembled near the garden fountain. Ice sculptures were wheeled through the marble corridors. Balloons the size of small children floated toward a ceiling, so high it had its own weather. By noon, the Han estate looked like something out of a dream. Han MinJae sat at the window of his private study on the second floor and watched all of it happening below him. He said nothing. His hands rested on the arms of his wheelchair, thick, scarred hands that had once signed the kinds of agreements that made entire city blocks change ownership overnight. Hands that had, in another lifetime, held things no man should hold. His face gave nothing away. It never did. 73 years of discipline had carved that stillness into him the way a river carves stone, slowly, completely, without mercy. Mr. Park stood behind him, holding a tablet showing the guest list. The RSVPs are confirmed, Mr. Park said carefully. 214 guests. Chairman Yoon's office called to confirm this morning. The minister's representative will arrive by 7. The Lotte family sent a separate car to deliver the gift in advance because it required a security escort. MinJae didn't respond. The media have their designated area outside the East Gate, Mr. Park continued. We're expecting 3 television crews and... Park, MinJae said quietly. Sir, close the tablet. Mr. Park closed it. They sat in silence for a moment, the old man and the loyal assistant, both watching the extravagance unfolding below. A chef in a white hat was directing someone to rearrange the dessert table. A florist was arguing with a decorator about the height of a centerpiece. Do you know what today is? MinJae asked. Your 73rd birthday, sir. And, before that, Mr. Park hesitated. Sir, before it became my birthday, MinJae said, it was just a Tuesday. He turned his wheelchair away from the window. By 4 o'clock, the first cancellation arrived. Chairman Yoon's assistant called to say the chairman had an unexpected family obligation. By 5, Minister Choi's representative sent a text, not even a call, saying the minister had been delayed in Busan and sent his regrets. By 5:30, 3 more cancellations came in rapid succession. By 6, when the gates were supposed to open for arriving guests, the driveway was empty. By 7, it was still empty. By 8, the jazz band had played 3 sets to no audience except the household staff, who stood near the walls, looking uncomfortable. The string quartet gave up and started quietly packing their instruments. The chefs moved through the kitchen with the particular devastation of people who had cooked magnificently for nothing. Ice sculptures began to weep on their display stands. MinJae remained in the Great Hall. He had allowed himself to be brought downstairs at 7, dressed in a dark suit, seated at the head of a table that could seat 40 people. The table was set for 40 people. 40 chairs, 40 place settings, 40 crystal glasses. He sat alone. The candles on the birthday cake burned down. A chef came and replaced them with new ones. No one spoke to him. The staff walked softly, the way people walk around someone who is suffering, not wanting to disturb the pain, but not knowing how to take it away either. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Park walked to MinJae's side and crouched slightly so their eyes were level. Sir, he said, we can have dinner brought out now. Chef prepared your favorite. Turn off the music, MinJae said. Sir?
Turn off
the music. Mr. Park straightened and signaled across the room. The jazz band stopped mid-note. The silence that followed was enormous. It filled the great hall the way water fills a jar, completely, instantly, leaving no room for anything else. MinJae looked at the empty chairs. He looked at the 40 place settings. He looked at the candles burning on a cake nobody would eat. And something in his face shifted, just barely, just for a moment, before the discipline came back and sealed it away again. But Mr. Park saw it. He had served this man for 40 years. He had seen things most people would never see. And in that moment, watching Han MinJae look at the empty table, Mr. Park felt something break quietly inside his own chest. The camera crews outside had already left. The photographers had waited until 8, taken pictures of the empty driveway for the irony, and gone home. By morning, there would be small items in entertainment blogs. Billionaire Han's birthday party, the party nobody attended. The cruelty of public life had many faces, and this was one of them. MinJae was reaching for the wheels of his chair to turn himself away from the table when the security panel on the wall crackled. "Sir." The voice of the head of security came through the speaker, careful and uncertain. There is one visitor." The room went still. Every staff member in the hall looked up. "One," Mr. Park said into the panel. "Yes, sir." At the main gate. "It's..." A pause. "It's a woman. Foreign. Black. She has a child with her. They're on foot, sir. No car." Mr. Park looked at MinJae. MinJae looked at the speaker on the wall, and for a long moment his expression was completely unreadable. Then he said, "Show me." A security screen on the wall flickered on. The image was grainy and gray in the late evening light, but clear enough. A woman stood at the gate. She was tall, with natural hair pulled back, wearing a winter coat that had seen better seasons. She was holding something, a box, or a container of some kind. Beside her stood a small girl, bundled up against the Seoul cold, bouncing slightly on her heels the way children do when they're excited and can't stop their own bodies from expressing it. The woman was looking directly into the camera. Not nervously. Not with the calculation of someone who had planned this. She was looking into the camera the way you look at something when you're not sure what it will do next, but you're not afraid of it either. "They came on foot," MinJae said. "Yes, sir. The nearest bus stop is 400 meters away." One of the senior household staff stepped forward. "Sir, if I may, it could be reporters. Or someone trying to take advantage of the situation. We should turn them away." MinJae stared at the screen. The little girl on the screen had now noticed the camera and was waving at it with her whole arm, grinning. "Let them in," MinJae said. "Sir." "Let them in." The household staff lined up near the entrance with the specific energy of people who expect something to be wrong. Vanessa Carter walked through the front door of the Han estate carrying a round cake tin covered in plastic wrap, her daughter Amara holding her free hand and looking around the entrance hall with her mouth slightly open. The entrance hall of the Han estate was roughly the size of a small airplane hangar. The ceilings were 5 meters high. There was a chandelier that cost more than most houses. The marble floor reflected everything. The lights, the people, the flowers that still stood in their perfect arrangements waiting for guests who never arrived. Amara looked up at the chandelier and whispered, "Mommy. Mommy, look." "I see it, baby." Eyes forward. Mr. Park stepped forward. "I'm the assistant to Mr. Han. May I ask?" "I'm Vanessa Carter. This is my daughter Amara." She held up the cake tin. "We brought something for the birthday." There was a silence in which approximately 6 different expressions moved across Mr. Park's face. "You brought a cake." "Yes." "To Han MinJae." "If that's the man whose birthday it is, then yes." Mr. Park looked at the cake tin, white plastic, the kind from a grocery store, a little scratched on the side, and then looked at the elaborate dessert table 15 meters away, where 7 professional cakes of extraordinary artistry were slowly being covered by staff trying to preserve them. "Mrs. Carter," Mr. Park said carefully, "how did you know about this event?" "My daughter saw the delivery trucks 3 days ago when we walked by. She asked what they were for. I told her someone was having a birthday party. Yesterday she asked if we could come, and I said..." Vanessa glanced at Amara. Amara looked up at Mr. Park with complete seriousness. "I said nobody should have a birthday without cake. And Mommy said you can't just go to a billionaire's birthday party. But then nobody came, and I saw it on the news, and I said that makes it worse, not better." Mr. Park stared at the child. "So," Vanessa said, "she baked a cake. And here we are. If this isn't a good time, we can go. I don't want to intrude." From the corridor at the far end of the hall, Han MinJae's wheelchair appeared. He moved himself forward. He had always refused to be pushed unless absolutely necessary, and stopped at the edge of the marble floor, looking at the two of them. Vanessa met his eyes. She didn't flinch. She didn't bow her head in the exaggerated deference some foreigners adopted around powerful Koreans, and she didn't pretend to be unintimidated either. She just looked at him the way she looked at most things, directly, with patience, waiting to see what would happen next. MinJae looked at the cake tin. Then he looked at Amara, who had stopped bouncing and was now studying him with the focused intensity that 9-year-old children reserve for things they are genuinely curious about. "You baked that," MinJae said to her. "Mostly," Amara said. "Mommy helped with the oven part, because I'm not allowed to do the oven part yet. But I did the mixing and the frosting." "What kind is it?" "Chocolate. With orange zest." "I read that chocolate and orange go together, but I've never tried it, so I wasn't sure. Have you ever tried chocolate and orange together?" MinJae was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "Then we can both find out," Amara said. And Han MinJae, the man who had once made grown men leave a room in tears, who had built an empire on the understanding that fear was more reliable than love, who had sat alone at a table set for 40 people while the candles burned down, laughed. Not a polite sound. Not the managed, controlled acknowledgement that powerful men use in social settings. He laughed, a real sound, surprised out of him, rusty with disuse, echoing slightly in the enormous empty hall. The staff looked at each other. Mr. Park quietly let out a breath he had been holding for approximately 9 hours. "Come," MinJae said. "We'll eat in the study. It's smaller, more appropriate for 3 people. They sat in the study, MinJae at the head of the table, Vanessa on one side, Amara across from her. The household staff brought food, real food, the kind the chefs had been keeping warm in the kitchen for 8 hours. But before any of that, MinJae lifted the lid of the plastic cake tin himself. The cake inside was imperfect in the specific way that homemade things are imperfect. The frosting was slightly uneven, thicker on one side than the other. Someone, Amara, most likely, had written happy birthday on the top in careful letters that started confident and ran out of space, so the Y at the end was smaller than the rest. There was a small smear where a finger had tested the frosting and been caught. MinJae looked at it for a long time. "The professionals used fondant," he said finally. "Swiss buttercream. One of them put edible gold leaf on top. This one has love on top," Amara said, with the certainty of someone stating a fact. Vanessa pressed her hand briefly over her eyes, then composed herself. "Amara." "What?" "It does." MinJae looked at the child. Something was moving in his expression, something he was not trying very hard to suppress this time. He reached out and picked up the serving knife himself and cut the first slice. He tasted it. Chocolate and orange. He sat with a taste for a moment, and something in his face went quiet and soft in a way that hadn't happened in a very long time, maybe years, maybe decades. "It works," he said. Amara pointed at him. "I told you." They ate. The chef appeared twice to offer additional courses, and both times MinJae waved him away. They ate the homemade cake and a simple meal of rice and soup and pickled vegetables that someone in the kitchen had put together without being asked, as if they understood instinctively that the 40-person gourmet feast wasn't right for this moment. MinJae asked Amara about school. Amara asked him about his wheelchair. Vanessa apologized for the question. MinJae said there was nothing to apologize for. "Does it hurt?" Amara asked. "I can't feel it," MinJae said. "I can't feel anything from here down." He indicated a line across his midsection. "That is its own kind of pain, different from the pain of feeling." Amara considered this very seriously. Like when you go numb in your foot and it's not hurting but it's also not right? Something like that. "I hate that feeling." "So do I." Vanessa watched the old man and her daughter talk, and she thought, not for the first time because she was a perceptive woman who noticed things, that there was something deeply familiar about him. Not his face. Not his voice. Something else. Something in the way he held himself and the specific quality of his attention when he listened. She couldn't place it that night. She would remember later. By 10 o'clock, Amara had fallen asleep in the armchair near the window, curled up with her coat as a blanket. The house was quiet. The staff had retreated. Mr. Park sat in the corridor outside in case he was needed. Vanessa and MinJae sat in the half-lit study, the ruins of the birthday cake between them, the city visible through the window, Seoul at night, layered and luminous, a city that never fully slept. "Why did you really come?" MinJae said. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "I told you. My daughter. Your daughter pushed you out the door. That's not the same as why you came." He looked at her. "You could have said no." Vanessa looked at her hands. "Because I know what it feels like," she said. "To prepare for something. To believe people are coming. And then to sit with all that empty space."
She paused.
"I've never lived in a mansion, but I've sat at enough empty tables to know what it does to a person." MinJae was quiet. "I'm sorry if that was too much," Vanessa said.
"No," he said.
It wasn't. He looked at the sleeping child. It wasn't too much at all. What Vanessa didn't know, what she wouldn't find out until much later, was that they had met before. 4 months earlier, on a gray Wednesday in October, Vanessa had been leaving the rehabilitation center near Mapo Bridge, where she volunteered twice a month. She was tired. She was always tired, between the English teaching job and the weekend tutoring and the early morning cleaning shifts at the hotel in Hongdae that she had taken on because Amara's school fees had gone up and the cost of living in Seoul was quietly relentless. Vanessa moved through her days in a state of carefully managed exhaustion that she refused to call suffering because other people had it worse, and she had her daughter, and her health, and her pride. She came around a corner near the rehabilitation center's side entrance and nearly walked into a wheelchair. The man in the chair had been trying to navigate a cracked section of sidewalk where the concrete had heaved up unevenly, the kind of infrastructure failure that is invisible to walking people and catastrophic to anyone using wheels. He was alone. His driver, it would later emerge, had gone to bring the car around and had been delayed by traffic. 2 people had walked past already. One had glanced down at him and looked away. The other had simply navigated around him, without stopping. Vanessa stopped. "Here," she said, "let me." And before he could say anything, she had taken hold of the chair handles and navigated him past the broken concrete with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years in medical settings and knew how to handle a wheelchair without making the person in it feel like cargo. She brought him to the smooth sidewalk at the corner and came around to face him. He was old, formidably built despite his age. The kind of person whose physical size you could read even sitting down. His eyes were sharp and dark. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you. Is someone coming for you?" "My driver." "Okay." She looked up the street, then back at him. "I can wait with you if you want. Or I can go. Whatever you prefer." He looked at her for a moment. "You can go," he said. "You clearly have somewhere to be." "I'm not in a hurry," she said, which was not entirely true but was the kind of thing Vanessa said anyway, because leaving someone alone on a street corner when they might need help was not something she was capable of. She stayed for 12 minutes. She asked if he'd had lunch. He said he had. She said she was going to get coffee from the cart at the corner anyway, and did he want anything? He said black coffee, no sugar. She came back with 2 cups, handed him one, and they stood. She stood, he sat, in a not uncomfortable silence for a few minutes while the October cold moved through the street and the city made its usual noise around them. His driver arrived, apologetic and slightly frantic. The man handed his coffee cup back to Vanessa. It was mostly finished, and said thank you again. Not elaborately, just thank you. The way you say it when you mean it. She said, happy to help. Take care of yourself. And she walked away. She did not know his name. She had not asked. In her experience, people who were alone when they needed help sometimes preferred to remain anonymous afterward. It preserved something for them. She understood that and respected it. She had thought about him occasionally in the weeks after, the way you think about strangers who drift through your life and leave no explanation for why they stayed in your memory. Then she had gotten busy, and life had moved forward the way it always did, relentlessly and without pause. She didn't know that the man in the wheelchair had watched her walk away and then sat very still for a long time. She didn't know that he had said something to his driver. She didn't know what he had asked him to find out. She would know all of this, but not yet. After the birthday visit, MinJae told Mr. Park to find everything there was to find about Vanessa Carter. Mr. Park delivered his report 4 days later, standing in the study with a single printed document, because MinJae had always preferred paper to screens, an old habit from a time before everything was digital. Vanessa Carter, Mr. Park said, 35 years old. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. Formerly a registered nurse. Pediatric ward, 5 years. Came to Korea 8 years ago, initially on a 1-year English teaching contract. Stayed. Her daughter, Amara, was born here. The father is not in the picture. He left before the daughter was born. Vanessa has never pursued legal action against him. She is currently working 3 jobs. Primary English instructor at the Han MinJae Language Academy, weekend private tutoring, and an early morning cleaning position at the Hongdae Hotel, which she started approximately 3 months ago. MinJae was reading the document as Mr. Park spoke. She volunteers at the Mapo Rehabilitation Center twice monthly, Mr. Park continued. She is current on all her bills. She does not have significant savings. She received one small government support payment when Amara was a year old and refused subsequent applications, according to the social worker who filed the notes.
He paused.
She is, by all accounts, someone who works extremely hard and refuses help. Has she ever researched me? MinJae asked. Our digital team says no. No searches for Han MinJae, Han Group, any related terms. She knows the name now, presumably, but she hasn't looked it up. MinJae put the paper down. Does she need money? He asked. Everyone in her situation needs money, sir. That's not what I asked. Does she want it? Mr. Park thought for a moment.
No.
I don't think so. MinJae was quiet for a long time. Outside, Seoul moved past the window in its familiar, indifferent way. He had lived in this city his entire life, and he still felt like a stranger in it most mornings. You know what I've discovered, he said. In 73 years? That the rarest thing in the world is not talent or courage or even intelligence. He tapped the paper. It's a person who simply doesn't want anything from you. Mr. Park said nothing. Set up a dinner, MinJae said. Invite her and the child. Casual. Nothing elaborate. If she feels like she's being managed, she won't come. And if she declines? Then she declines. He turned back to the window. But ask. She didn't decline. The dinner happened on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the birthday. Vanessa came after her last tutoring student and was therefore slightly late, which she apologized for at the door, and MinJae said, "Don't apologize for working," with a finality that closed that subject completely. Amara arrived with a drawing she had made of the Han estate from memory. It was remarkably accurate for a 9-year-old. She had the proportions of the entrance hall right, had remembered the chandelier, had drawn MinJae's wheelchair at the head of a table with a little figure of herself across from it. At the top, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "The night we ate cake at the big house." She handed it to MinJae like it was the most natural thing in the world. He held it for a long time. "Can I keep this?" he said. "I made it for you," Amara said. "That's why I brought it." He had Mr. Park frame it that night. Over dinner, simple, as promised, soup and grilled fish and vegetables, the kitchen having understood the assignment this time. The conversation moved through various territories. MinJae asked Amara about her studies. She was, it emerged, exceptionally strong in mathematics and had complicated opinions about the Korean education system that she delivered with great confidence. He asked Vanessa about nursing. She talked about the pediatric ward, about the things she'd seen, about why she had left, not because she'd lost the love of it, but because after Amara's father left and she had been alone and exhausted and looking at the possibility of raising a child in America without family nearby, Seoul had offered itself as a place to start again, and she had taken it. "You came here alone," MinJae said. "With a baby." "Amara was 8 months old," Vanessa said. "She slept through the flight. She's always been a good traveler." "I'm an excellent traveler," Amara confirmed. "You weren't afraid?" MinJae said. Vanessa looked at him steadily. "I was terrified," she said. "I was also out of options. Those two things can both be true." MinJae looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. "They can." Then Amara put down her spoon and looked around the dining room with the expression of someone who has been thinking about something for a while and has decided to say it. "Why is your house so big," she said, "if nobody lives in it?" The room went very quiet. Vanessa put a hand on her arm. "Amara." "I'm not being rude," Amara said. "I'm asking because I don't understand. Our apartment is small, and it's always full because it's me and Mommy. This house is so big, and it's just you. Doesn't that feel wrong?" MinJae had spent a lifetime making people afraid to say difficult things to him. He had spent decades in rooms where nobody said what they actually meant because what they actually meant might cost them something. He had forgotten, or perhaps had never fully known, what it felt like to have someone simply ask the question that was sitting right there in the middle of everything. "Yes," he said after a moment. "It feels wrong." Amara nodded, satisfied. "You should get a dog," she said, and picked up her spoon again. Vanessa looked across the table at Han MinJae and saw something in his face that she recognized, though she couldn't name it precisely. The specific expression of a person who has been carrying something alone for so long they've forgotten it's possible to put it down. She looked away before he could catch her looking. The story that broke 3 weeks later started small. A tabloid photographer, staking out the Han estate on the off chance of catching something interesting, got a photograph of Vanessa and Amara arriving for their third visit. The photograph was not salacious. It was simply a black woman and a child walking through the gate of one of the most famous private residences in Seoul. That was enough. The headline read, "Billionaire Han's Mystery Woman, who is the American visiting in secret." By the next morning, it had been shared 40,000 times. The comments were what they always were. People who had never met Vanessa Carter and knew nothing about her constructed a complete biography of her motivations in the comment sections of 3 different platforms. She was a gold digger. She was a scammer. She had specifically targeted a lonely elderly man. Some comments were about her race. She was black and American in a city where both of those things made you visible in specific ways, and some people were not kind about either. Some comments were sympathetic and accused the Han family of abandoning their father. The sympathetic comments were outnumbered. The story reached Daniel Han before 10 in the morning. Daniel Han was 45 years old and had spent most of his adult life in the specific way that children of the very wealthy spend their adult lives when they are not remarkable, managing expectations, performing competence, and waiting. He sat in his office at the Han Group subsidiary, where he held a senior title that had been arranged for him, and he read the article 3 times. Then, he called his sister. Sujin Han was 42 and operated as what modern language called an influencer, which in her case meant she hosted a lifestyle channel about luxury travel and aesthetics that had 3 million subscribers and paid her extremely well. She was in Jeju when Daniel called. She was also, it should be said, not entirely indifferent to her father. She simply found prolonged emotional complexity inconvenient, and her father was almost entirely made of prolonged emotional complexity. "Have you seen it?" Daniel said. "I'm looking at it right now. We need to do something." "Like what, Daniel?" "She's visiting him. She's not stealing anything." "Not yet." Sujin was quiet for a moment. "You're worried about the will, aren't you?" Another silence. "I'll come back to Seoul," she said. Meanwhile, Vanessa's employer at the Han Language Academy had also seen the article. The director called her into his office that Friday and said, carefully, diplomatically, in the way that Korean professional culture specialized in delivering bad news through excessive courtesy, that some parents of students had expressed concern. Concern about what? He didn't specify exactly. Concern about the association. Concern about whether this kind of media attention was appropriate for a language academy that prided itself on discretion. He was sure Vanessa understood. Vanessa understood perfectly. She walked out of his office with her face completely composed and her hands slightly clenched at her sides. She told Amara at dinner that evening that things might be a little complicated for a while. Amara asked, "Is it because of the billionaire man?" "Yes. But we didn't do anything wrong."
No.
"We didn't. So, why does it matter what people say?" Vanessa looked at her daughter, 9 years old, sharp and warm and completely sure of herself in the way children are before the world begins its long project of teaching them doubt, and she said, Because sometimes what people say can change what other people do, even when everyone knows it's wrong. Amara thought about this. That's not fair. No, Vanessa agreed. It's not. She helped Amara with her homework and put her to bed, and then sat in the small living room of their apartment for a long time. She thought about calling MinJae. She thought about not calling him. She thought about the cleaning job at the hotel, which she couldn't afford to lose, and about the tutoring clients who had already begun texting with vague questions about their schedule reassessment, which meant they had seen the article and were deciding whether she was a liability. She thought about what it would mean to walk away. She thought about a man sitting alone at a table set for 40 people. She didn't call, but she didn't stop visiting. The attack from Daniel and Sujin came in layers. First, they hired a public relations firm, which issued a statement expressing concern for their father's well-being and suggesting that people in his vulnerable state could sometimes be manipulated by those who appeared to offer friendship. The statement was carefully worded to imply everything without explicitly saying anything. It was effective. Then Daniel commissioned a private investigator's report on Vanessa, which found nothing concerning and was therefore quietly shelved. The filing of it, however, leaked because things like that always leaked, and the story became Han family orders investigation into mystery American woman. Sujin did a live stream in which she talked about protecting her father with great emotional sincerity. Comments flooded in with support. The comments assumed that protection was necessary. They assumed it because the alternative, that a wealthy family was attacking a nurse-turned teacher and her young daughter to protect their inheritance, was a more complicated story, and complicated stories are harder to sustain in the scroll. Vanessa's hotel job ended. The manager called her the day after the investigation story broke and used words like restructuring and position review. She listened. She said thank you and hung up. She did not cry. She went to pick up Amara from school, and on the walk home Amara took her hand and said, "Your hand is cold, Mommy." "I know. Are we okay?" "We're always okay." Amara looked up at her. "Is that true, or are you just saying it?" Vanessa looked down at her daughter. "Both," she said honestly. That night she wrote an email to MinJae. She thought carefully about each sentence. She told him she had enjoyed their visits. She told him she had enormous respect for him. She said that she thought it would be better for both of them, and especially for Amara, if she stepped back. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped he was well. She pressed send before she could revise it. MinJae read the email at 6 in the morning. He read it 3 times. Then he put his phone face down on the desk and sat for a long time. Mr. Park found him there an hour later, still sitting, the phone still face down. "Sir? Is something wrong?" "Call my doctors," MinJae said. "I need to increase the frequency of my cardiac check-ins." Mr. Park looked at him carefully. "Sir, are you having—" "It's precautionary," MinJae said. "Call them." 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, the medical team was called to the estate on an emergency basis. MinJae had suffered what his cardiologist would describe as a serious cardiac event, not a full heart attack, but significant, dangerous, the kind of thing that doesn't give warnings. The ambulance arrived at the estate. The paramedics worked quickly. Mr. Park rode with him to the hospital. Mr. Park had tried to reach Daniel and Sujin from the ambulance. Daniel's phone went to voicemail. Sujin's assistant answered. She was in Singapore for a brand collaboration event. The assistant said she would pass on the message immediately. Mr. Park said it was an emergency. The assistant said absolutely right away. Mr. Park sat in the hospital corridor at 3 in the morning and looked at his phone and thought about 40 years of service and what loyalty meant and what it cost. He called Vanessa. She picked up on the second ring. He could hear immediately from her voice that she had been awake. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "I apologize for calling at this hour." "Mr. Han." "Which hospital?" she said. "Asen Medical Center. The cardiac." "I'm coming." She organized a neighbor to stay with Amara, and she took the night bus across Seoul, and she arrived at Asen Medical Center at 4:15 in the morning with her coat buttoned wrong, and her hair still half-binned from sleep. Mr. Park met her in the corridor. He looked, for the first time in the months she had known him, like an old man. She put her hand on his arm briefly, and he nodded without speaking, because there are moments when the things you want to say require more steadiness than you currently have. She sat in the corridor, and she waited. At 6:30, a doctor came out and said MinJae was stable. Critical but stable. The next 12 hours would be important. He was in a monitored room, sedated, resting. "Can I see him?" Vanessa asked. The doctor looked at her, then at Mr. Park, who nodded almost imperceptibly. For a few minutes, the doctor said. She went in alone. MinJae lay in the hospital bed with the particular smallness that illness gives to even the largest people. The machinery beeped softly. His hands were still on the blanket, those scarred, heavy hands. She sat in the chair beside him, and she looked at him for a long time. She wasn't sure why she was there. Not in a way she could articulate. She just knew that she had gotten on a bus at 4 a.m. because someone had called and said he was sick, and she would have done the same for anyone she knew who was sick and alone in a hospital at 4 a.m. That was the beginning and end of it. She stayed. She sat in the chair. She dozed for a while and woke up with her neck stiff. The hospital morning began its slow mechanical processes around her. The shift change, the early rounds, the sounds of a large institution coming awake. At 7:40, MinJae opened his eyes. He turned his head slowly, the way people do when consciousness returns gradually, with uncertainty about what they will find. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the machines. He looked at the chair beside the bed. Vanessa was sitting in the chair. She had a paper cup of coffee from the hospital vending machine, and she was looking at her phone with the careful, focused attention of someone trying to make sure everything at home was all right. MinJae watched her for a moment. Then he said, "You came." She looked up. "Of course. I sent you away." "You didn't send me anywhere. I made a decision." She put her phone down. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a truck." He looked at the ceiling again. "My children. Mr. Park is trying to reach them." He was quiet. She could see him understanding, from her tone, from the particular careful blankness of her face, what that meant. He looked at the window. Outside, Seoul was going to work. Buses and cars, and the early morning light of a city that continued regardless of what happened inside its buildings. "Why are you here?" he said. Not harshly, genuinely asking. "Because nobody else was," she said. He turned back to look at her. Something in his face was undefended in the specific way that illness allows. The layers gone, the management gone, just the man underneath. "That first time," he said slowly. "The sidewalk near Mapo Bridge. October." She went very still. "That was you," he said. She looked at him. And then, with a certainty that arrived all at once, she understood why he had seemed familiar that first night in the study. The wheelchair. The specific way he held himself. The quality of his voice. "That was you," she said. "Yes." "You didn't say anything. That night at dinner, when we first."
"No."
"Why not?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I wanted to know who you were when you didn't know who I was." She sat with this for a long moment. "And," she said. "The same," he said. "You were exactly the same." He was in the hospital for 9 days. Vanessa came every second day, always bringing something from Amara, a drawing, a note, once a small container of cookies that Amara had baked herself, chocolate chip, slightly overbaked on the bottom. Absolutely perfect. MinJae kept all of it. Daniel Han came on day 3 for 40 minutes and spent most of it in the corridor with the doctors asking questions about prognosis and recovery timelines that had very little to do with how his father was feeling. He came into the room briefly, stood at the bed, said, "Father, I'm glad you're recovering. You need to take better care of yourself." Then he left. Soo-jin came on day 6, direct from the airport, still in her travel clothes, and she cried when she saw him, which was genuine. She was not a heartless person. She was a person who had made choices over many years that had created distance, and distance had become habit, and habit had become comfortable, and comfortable had become who she was. And standing in a hospital room looking at her father in a hospital bed was confronting all of those accumulated choices at once. She held his hand. She told him she loved him. She stayed for 2 hours. When she left, MinJae looked at the ceiling for a long time. On day 7, He asked Mr. Park to bring a specific box from the study. It was a lacquered box, dark red, small enough to hold in one hand. Mr. Park brought it. MinJae held it on his lap for a while before he opened it. Inside was a letter. It had been read many times. The paper had that quality, the softness at the folds that comes from being opened and closed over years. The handwriting was a woman's handwriting, in Korean, neat and deliberate. His wife's handwriting. He handed the letter to Vanessa when she came the next day. "I can't read Korean well," she said. "I'll translate it for you," he said, sentence by sentence. He unfolded the letter. He held it with the steadiness of someone who has read something many times but not recently. His voice was even, which cost him something. "My love," he read. "I'm writing this because the doctors say I should prepare for things I don't want to prepare for, and I think the thing I'm least prepared for is leaving you alone. Not because I think you'll be helpless. You have never been helpless. But because I know what you are like when no one is watching. And I know that the version of you that no one sees, the one who feeds the neighborhood cats when he thinks no one is looking, who kept every drawing our children made in school, who cried when the old factory on the river was torn down because you remembered when your father took you there as a boy, that version of you will be very alone without someone to see him." MinJae paused. His voice had steadied further, the way people steady themselves against things that want to move them. "I don't know what comes next for you," he continued reading, "but I know you, and I know that eventually, when you're ready, you'll discover what I always try to tell you, that the things worth keeping are not the things that make people fear you. They're the things that make people want to stay." He folded the letter. "She wrote it 6 months before she died. I found it after." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "She knew you very well," she said. "Better than I knew myself." He folded the letter back into the box. "She was right about most things. She was right about this." "About what specifically?" He looked at her. "That when the right person came along, I would know." He held up a hand before she could say anything. "Not romantically. I'm not confused about what this is. I'm talking about something different. Someone who sees you. Simply that. Who looks at you without the history, without the money, without the fear, and sees the man underneath." He looked at his hands. "My children look at me and see an obligation, a liability, a fortune. You looked at me on a street corner in October and saw a person who needed help getting over a broken sidewalk." Vanessa looked at the lacquered box in his hands. "I need to tell you something," MinJae said, "about who I was. You don't have to. I need to." He set the box down. "Because you should know what you're sitting next to. What this man's hands have done." He talked for almost 2 hours. He told her about the 1980s, when Seoul was different. Rougher and faster and more lawless in ways that modern versions of the city had smoothed over, the way cities smooth over their own histories. He told her about a young man from a poor neighborhood in Mapo who had intelligence and ambition and no channel for either, and who had found his way into an organization that rewarded both without asking too many questions about where they came from. He told her what that organization was. He used careful words, but he was clear. He told her about the things that happened during those years. He didn't catalog them. There are things that don't belong in catalogs, but he was honest about the nature of them. Violence. Coercion. The specific mechanics of power, when power is not constrained by law. He told her about the moment, in his mid-30s, when he made the choice to leave, not because he had become suddenly good, but because he had met a woman who made him want to try, and because the man running the organization was becoming someone MinJae could not follow anymore, and because he had looked at what he was building and understood that it would destroy him before he destroyed it. Leaving had cost him. He had carried it for decades. Not the leaving itself, the years before the leaving. He told her about the assassination attempt. 2008. He had built his legitimate empire by then, had been clean for over 20 years, and someone from his past had decided that the past doesn't stay past. They had been mostly right. He had survived, but the bullet had done what it did to his spine, and he had woken up in a hospital room and understood that he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. "The funny thing," he said, and his voice was calm, "is that I always thought my punishment would come from the law, from some authority with jurisdiction over what I had done. But it came from a man in a car park with a grievance." He looked at his hands. God has a sense of irony. Vanessa had listened to all of it without interruption. Her face had moved through various expressions, but she had not looked away from him, and she had not flinched, which was notable, because some of what he said was flinch-worthy. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because you should make an informed decision about whether to keep coming," he said. "You have a daughter. You have a life you've built carefully. I don't want you to sit next to something poisonous without knowing what it is." Vanessa looked at him for a long time. "I've worked in pediatric wards," she said. "I've sat next to children who were dying. I've held their hands and talked to them about whatever they wanted to talk about. I didn't require them to be clean first."
She paused.
"You spent decades being someone who did terrible things. And then you spent more decades trying to do something else. I'm not going to tell you that makes everything okay, because it doesn't. But I'm also not going to pretend it doesn't matter that you tried." "You're very sure of things," he said. "No," she said. "I'm very clear about things. That's different." He looked at her.
"Keep coming," he said.
It wasn't quite a request. It wasn't quite a command. It was something in between, something that was honest about needing, which for MinJae was harder than anything else he'd said that day. "Okay," she said. He came home from the hospital on a Tuesday. The following Saturday, he had the legal team come to the estate. He met with them for 3 hours in the library, door closed, Mr. Park standing outside. When they left, MinJae called Mr. Park in. "The will has been updated," he said. "Sir." "Don't ask me what's in it." "I wasn't going to, sir." "Good." MinJae looked at the desk, then at the window. "I know exactly who deserves my legacy. Not what I've earned. Who deserves what it should have stood for, if I'd started differently." He was quiet for a moment. "The work that needs to happen after I'm gone, I know who can do it." Mr. Park stood very still. "Is there anything else, sir?" he said carefully.
"Yes."
"Get me Amara's drawing. I want it moved from the bedroom to the study. I want to see it when I'm working." The children found out about the updated will through channels that such things always find: a leaked conversation, a well-placed contact in the legal firm, the specific ecosystem of surveillance that wealthy families maintain around their wealthy parents. Daniel called MinJae directly. "I've heard you've changed your will," Daniel said. "Your hearing is accurate," MinJae said. "Father." "Daniel, you need to understand that there are people who could take advantage of your current emotional state." "Daniel," MinJae said, and something in his voice went very quiet in a way that Daniel remembered from childhood, from the specific moments when his father was done with something, and you knew it absolutely. "I have never, in 73 years, made a significant decision from emotional state. I am not beginning now. The American woman is not your concern. She absolutely is my concern when she is clearly manipulating. She told me 3 weeks ago that she was ending contact with me to protect her daughter from the media attention that you and your sister were generating." MinJae paused. "She asked for nothing. She accepted nothing. She came to the hospital at 4 in the morning when no one could reach you or Sue Jean, and she sat in a chair for 14 hours. Another pause. "You came for 40 minutes and spent most of it in the corridor. I love you, Daniel. I have always loved you, even when I was terrible at showing it. But I am done allowing love to be confused with inheritance." The line was quiet. "This isn't over," Daniel said. "No," MinJae agreed. "Probably not." The legal action started the following week. Daniel had found a lawyer who specialized in what was legally described as undue influence, the argument that MinJae had been manipulated by a foreign national into changing his will. It was the kind of legal action that doesn't require proof to be damaging. The filing of it was enough. The filing generated news. The news generated more pressure on Vanessa. She had a confrontation she hadn't anticipated. She had come to the estate on a Wednesday afternoon. She came twice a week now, usually in the afternoons when Amara was at school, and Daniel was there. She didn't know he was coming. He apparently hadn't known she would be there either, or had known and decided this was the moment. He was standing in the entrance hall when she came in. Tall, well-dressed, with the specific tension of a man who has rehearsed what he's going to say and is now committed to saying it. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "Mr. Han, I want to be direct with you. Please. Whatever my father has told you, whatever arrangement you believe exists, I want you to understand that it will not survive legal scrutiny." His voice was very controlled. You are a foreign national with no legal standing in Korean inheritance proceedings. My sister and I are his children. We will challenge any modification to the will, and we have substantial grounds to do so. Vanessa looked at him. I see. I'm not trying to be unkind. I'm trying to save everyone the difficulty of a prolonged legal process. Mr. Han, Vanessa said, I don't know what's in your father's will. I've never asked what's in his will. I've never discussed his finances with him. I came here today because your father invited me to lunch, and because I like him, and he's been unwell, and I wanted to see how he was doing.
She paused.
I understand that you don't believe that. I understand that from where you're standing, it probably doesn't make sense. But it's true. And I think, somewhere, you know it's true, which is why you're standing here looking the way you're looking. Daniel stared at her. Now, she said, if you want to have lunch with your father and me, you're welcome to. It might be a good afternoon. But if you've come here to intimidate me, I need you to know that I was a single mother in a foreign country for 9 years with no family safety net. You are not frightening. She walked past him toward the study. MinJae was at his desk. He looked up when she came in and read something in her face. Was Daniel here? He said. Yes. Did he threaten you? She sat down. He tried to. And I told him to join us for lunch. She met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere, MinJae. I want you to hear that clearly. I made a decision to be your friend, and I don't unmake decisions because things get difficult. But I also need you to hear me say, she leaned slightly forward. I never wanted your money. I want you to know that I know what people think, and I want to say it plainly, directly, to your face. I never wanted anything from you except exactly what you gave me, which was a conversation and a meal and the chance to see my daughter make someone happy. MinJae looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. I know you know, she said. That's exactly why I trust you. He almost smiled. You stole my line. I improved it. His health declined over the next 6 weeks in the way that health sometimes declines in older people after a cardiac event, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the incremental withdrawing of capacity that is its own kind of announcement. He tired more easily. He slept more. The doctors adjusted things and monitored things, and were careful in the specific way that careful doctors are when they are managing something that is not ultimately manageable. MinJae knew what was happening. He was a man who had spent decades dealing in realities, and he had no interest in comfortable fictions about his own condition. He arranged one specific day. He called Vanessa on a Thursday morning and said, bring Amara on Saturday. All day. We'll do whatever she wants. Vanessa asked, are you all right? I'm fine, he said. I just want a whole day. They came at 10 in the morning. Amara had decided, after considerable deliberation, that the day should involve baking something, a game that she would teach MinJae. She had chosen Uno, which she was convinced she would win, and a walk in the garden, because she had noticed through the windows that the garden was very beautiful, and she wasn't sure he went out there enough. They baked in the morning. The kitchen staff stepped back with the particular grace of people who understand that their job right now is to be invisible. Amara directed operations with enormous authority, assigning MinJae the role of mixing bowl holder and official tester. Vanessa did the oven work. They made a lemon tart, which Amara had decided was more sophisticated than cake. It's very technical, Amara explained seriously to MinJae. The curd has to be exactly the right temperature, or it goes wrong. That's the interesting part. It's like a science experiment you can eat. I didn't know you were interested in science, MinJae said. I'm interested in everything, Amara said. Mommy says that's the best way to be. They played Uno after lunch. MinJae had not played a card game since. He genuinely could not remember since when. Amara explained the rules with the efficiency of someone who knows them deeply and wants to make sure there is no excuse for losing. She won the first 3 games. MinJae won the 4th. He cheated, Amara announced. I did not cheat, MinJae said, and he was smiling the real smile again, the one that transformed his face. Mommy, he cheated. I didn't see anything, Vanessa said, from behind her hand. They went into the garden in the afternoon. The November air was cold and clear. A staff member pushed MinJae's chair over the garden paths while Amara ran ahead and then came back to report on discoveries: a stone lantern, a small fish pond, a persimmon tree still holding its fruit. Vanessa walked beside MinJae's chair. "This garden is beautiful," she said. "I didn't know it went this far back." "My wife planted most of it," he said. She was very particular about gardens. She used to say a garden is the truest thing about a house. You can fake the inside, but a garden shows who you really are. Vanessa looked at the garden. The persimmon tree, the stone lantern, the careful arrangements of plants that had grown freely within structure, formal and wild at the same time. "She sounds like she was remarkable," Vanessa said. "She was better than I deserved," he said simply. Amara came running back. "There's a fish in the pond. A big one. Come and see." They went to see the fish. Amara crouched at the edge of the pond with complete absorption. MinJae's chair was positioned beside her. Vanessa stood behind them both, and for a moment she had the specific sensation of a photograph being taken somewhere in the mind. The old man and the child side by side at the pond edge, his large scarred hand and her small 9-year-old hand both pointing at the same fish.
She kept that.
They ate dinner simply, the three of them, as the light went out of the day. Amara fell asleep at the table this time, mid-sentence, her head dropping slowly onto her folded arms with the boneless grace of children sleeping. Vanessa eased her jacket under Amara's cheek and sat back down. The candles burned low. "I have something I want to say to you," MinJae said. "Okay. I want to say it while I'm still in a position to say it clearly." He held the edge of the table with both hands, looking at the candle. "When you came through that gate 6 months ago with that cake, he stopped. I was sitting in that hall for 8 hours with nobody coming. I had spent my whole life making sure people were afraid of me, and I had succeeded completely. There was not one person in 214 who wanted to be in the same room as me voluntarily." He looked up. "You came because your daughter said nobody should be alone on their birthday. That was the whole reason. No strategy. No plan. Just nobody should be alone." Vanessa said nothing. "That's the thing that I forgot," he said. "In all the years of building things and protecting things and making sure no one could touch me, I forgot that the whole point of any of it was supposed to be that someone would want to be near you." He looked at Amara, asleep at the table. "That child is 9 years old, and she understood something that took me 73 years to almost understand." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm grateful. That's what I wanted to say. I'm not good at it. I'm not practiced at it. But I'm grateful for all of it. The cake, the dinner, the Uno, all of it." Vanessa's eyes were bright. She didn't look away. "You're welcome," she said. "For all of it." He nodded once. "Good," he said. "Now, let's have the last of that lemon tart." He died 3 nights later. He died in his sleep, in his own bed, at the Han estate, with the city visible through the window and the garden invisible in the dark below. Mr. Park was there, had been there all evening, as he had been most evenings for the past weeks, sitting in the corridor because he understood without being told that this was what was needed. The medical team came and confirmed what the monitoring equipment had already shown.
It was peaceful, they said.
He would not have woken from sleep. Mr. Park stood in the corridor for a long time after. Then he called Vanessa. She came. She did not need to. There was nothing practically she could do. But she came, with Amara asleep in the back of the taxi, and she sat in the entrance hall of the Han estate until the official procedures were completed, and when Mr. Park came out of the corridor for the last time, he found her sitting there very straight in the chair with her hands folded in her lap, and he stood in front of her, and she stood up and they looked at each other, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. "He was ready," Mr. Park said finally. "He wasn't afraid." "I know," Vanessa said. "He wasn't afraid of anything." The will reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. It was held in a conference room at the offices of MinJae's primary legal firm, a place of considerable glass and considerable leather, and the specific quiet of spaces where large amounts of money are discussed. Daniel arrived with 2 lawyers. Sujin arrived with 1 and a support person. Former associates and senior Han Group employees occupied 2 rows. Mr. Park sat in the back. Vanessa sat in the middle section, alone, wearing the best coat she owned. She had been asked to be present. The lawyers had insisted, which had caused a brief legal skirmish because Daniel had moved to exclude her on the grounds of the still pending undue influence claim. The court had not supported the exclusion. She was present. The room was full of people expecting billions. The lead attorney was a composed man in his 60s who had been doing this for decades and therefore had no illusions about the nature of these rooms. He began reading. The first portion of the will directed that 60% of the Han personal fortune, the fortune distinct from the Han Group corporate structure, which was governed by separate instruments, be directed to a series of specifically named charitable institutions, hospitals, a national disability access initiative, 3 orphanages, a scholarship fund for first-generation university students from Mapo District, where MinJae had grown up, a child welfare organization, a foundation for the rehabilitation of injured workers. The numbers involved were staggering. The room was very quiet. Daniel's lawyers were writing things down quickly. The attorney continued. The Han Group corporate holdings were distributed with careful precision. Significant stakes to employees through a newly established trust structure, portions to Daniel and Sujin through their existing corporate roles, provisions for long-standing business partners. Daniel received considerably less than he had expected. Sujin received considerably less than she had expected. Neither received nothing. Both would be comfortable for the rest of their lives. The attorney paused. The remaining instrument, he said, pertains to the Han MinJae Foundation for Family Recovery. The room shifted. The foundation, the attorney continued, has been established with an initial endowment of $340 million equivalent. Its mission is the support of single-parent families and children in need, with specific emphasis on educational access, healthcare, and economic stability programs in Korea and internationally. He looked up from the document. Leadership of the foundation. The role of executive director, with full operational authority, is bequeathed to Mrs. Vanessa Carter. The room erupted. Daniel's chair scraped back. Sujin pressed a hand over her mouth. 3 different lawyers spoke at once. The former associates looked at each other with a specific expression of people recalibrating in real time. Vanessa sat still. She sat very still, in the middle of all the noise, and she looked at the front of the room where the attorney was holding up a hand for order with the patience of someone who has done this before. She looked at the document in his hand. She felt, somewhere in her chest, something that was not quite grief and not quite joy, and was perhaps the thing that happens when both arrive at the same time. She thought about a gate buzzer going off. A security screen. A man in a wheelchair alone at a table set for 40 people. The attorney cleared his throat pointedly, and the room quieted enough for him to speak. The will also includes a personal statement, he said, to be read in full at this proceeding. He lifted a single page. From Han MinJae, regarding the appointment of Mrs. Carter. He read, I have spent my life in rooms full of powerful people. I have never, in all those rooms, met someone as powerful as a mother raising a child alone in a foreign country with nothing but her integrity and her love. I have met such a person. I chose her not because she was kind to me, though she was, but because she was the first person in decades who wanted nothing from me. In my experience, the people who want nothing from you are the only people capable of giving everything. I trust her with my legacy because I trust her. That is the whole of it. The attorney put the paper down. Vanessa was looking at the table in front of her. Her hands were still. Only someone very close would have been able to see what was happening in her face. The enormous controlled effort of keeping everything in, of not letting 73 years of a man's loneliness and final wisdom, and this impossible, accidental friendship undo her in a conference room full of lawyers. Mr. Park, from the back of the room, could see her face. He looked at the ceiling. He pressed his lips together. He breathed very carefully, the way old men breathe when they are not going to cry. Daniel stood up. This is not over, he said.
It was.
It was over. The legal challenge he filed the following week was withdrawn 6 months later. Partly because the Will's foundations were legally impeccable, MinJae having clearly anticipated exactly this, and partly because Vanessa proved in those 6 months to be so publicly and devastatingly competent at establishing the foundation that the optics of continuing the attack became untenable. Soojin actually withdrew her support from the legal action. She called Vanessa once in private. It was a short call. Soojin said, "I think my father saw something in you that we should have seen ourselves. I wanted to say that." Vanessa said, "Thank you." They didn't become close. But the war was over. 5 years later, the Han MinJae Foundation for Family Recovery was operational in 11 countries. It had funded university educations for over 4,000 students. It had established 15 single-parent support centers in Korea alone, 3 in the United States, and several across Southeast Asia. It had partnered with hospital systems to provide free pediatric care to families who couldn't afford it. It had funded accessibility renovations for public spaces across Seoul. Amara Carter was 14. She was, her teachers said, extraordinary at mathematics and biology and inconveniently confident in her opinions about most things. She had decided she wanted to be a doctor and had also decided she wanted to eventually run the foundation, and when people suggested she couldn't do both, she looked at them with the expression she had learned from her mother, which was the expression of someone who has simply declined to accept the framework of the question. On a cold Saturday morning in November, 5 years to the month after Han MinJae's birthday, there was a ceremony in the courtyard of the foundation's Seoul headquarters, a building that had been converted from an old warehouse in Mapo district, in the neighborhood where MinJae had grown up. Scholarship recipients gathered in the courtyard, students from 17 countries, their families behind them, everyone in the particular nervous happiness of people whose lives have genuinely been changed. A small orchestra played. There were speeches. Vanessa spoke last, briefly, because she had never liked long speeches and MinJae hadn't either. After the speeches, a curtain was removed from something at the center of the courtyard. It was a sculpture.
Bronze.
Not large, about 1.5 meters tall. An old man in a wheelchair from behind, and beside him a small girl from behind, both of them leaning slightly forward as if they were looking at something in front of them. Between them on a surface, a table, or perhaps a wall, it was ambiguous, was a round shape that was recognizable as a cake. It was imprecise enough to be art, precise enough to be true. At the base, the inscription, "Power made him feared. Kindness made him remembered." Amara stood next to her mother in front of the sculpture for a long time after the ceremony had begun to disperse. People moved around them, taking photographs, talking, the sounds of a gathering at its natural end. Amara looked at the sculpture with a focused quality she had always brought to things that mattered. "Is it right?" Vanessa asked her. "Does it look like him?" Amara tilted her head. "Not really," she said. "But I think that's okay. It looks like how he felt. That's more important." Vanessa looked at her daughter. 14 years old. Natural hair, like her mother's. A little taller than felt possible given how recently she had been 9. Standing in Mapo District, Seoul, South Korea, in front of a bronze monument to a billionaire former criminal who had spent the last months of his life playing Uno and eating homemade lemon tart. "He would have liked this," Amara said. "Yes," Vanessa agreed. "He would have liked this very much." They stood together for a moment longer. The city moved around them, the way cities do, indifferent and enormous and continuous, generating its own noise and weather and drama, producing stories every minute that no one would ever know. An old man alone at a birthday table. A woman at a gate holding a cake. A child saying nobody should be alone on their birthday with the absolute authority of someone who has identified a truth and sees no reason to complicate it. The smallest things.
The things that last.
If this story moved you, stayed with you, made you think about someone you know who might be sitting alone at their own table, leave a comment below.
Tell us.
We read every one. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is show up with a homemade cake. We'll see you in the next one.